of the world, top of the pop the lid off. Oh.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of our Wonder Women podcast, the main podcast for the business magazine for women.com. In our podcast, just like in our magazine, we're focused on promoting women's voices in business, technology, STEM, politics, sports, arts, and culture. My name is Monica Antohi. I'm the founder of the business magazine for women.com and today's host. Today's conversation is filled with lessons for parents and anybody that cares for children. In this day of digital integration, when a social media comment can throw a child into depression or even worst cases in suicide, and when we need social validation to feel like we belong, we here at the Business Magazine for Women, we thought it was a very good idea to speak with Dr. Lisa Strohman. She's the founder and CEO at Digital Citizen Academy. She's developed a curriculum to provide education and prevention programs that address the challenges of that children face today in our overly digitized society. It's not an easy conversation. Let me put it out there to begin with. It's not an easy conversation, but it's a very needed conversation. Dr. Lisa Strohman and the Digital Citizen Academy both have been instrumental in providing tools needed for children and for parents to navigate our digital lives. With her TED Talks and the many TV appearances, Dr. Lisa Strohman is dedicated to protect the next generation from the pitfalls of the digital life. We are more than our digital selves, and she's shown us the way. That's today's conversation. It's an important one, and we hope you really enjoy it and you really take some notes and apply it to your day-to-day life. But before I get you through our recording, there are two quick things worth mentioning. First one is that the summer issue of the Business Magazine for Women.com, our magazine, our summer issue is out, and you can find it at thebusinessmagazineforwomen.com/magazine. And secondly, we want to thank everyone for their support on Patreon and on the other platforms. We are women-owned, women-led, women-focused, promoting women in business, technology, STEM, politics, sports, arts, and culture. To join our very supportive tribe, please go to patreon.com/wonderwomenpodcast, make your pledge, and join our tribe. Thanks. That's it. Now let's get you to our conversation.
Today we're speaking with Dr. Lisa Strohman. The reason why we're speaking with Dr. Lisa Strohman is because she's founder and CEO of Digital Citizen Academy, and that is an amazing program that I can't wait to talk to you guys about. And it talks about, it manages a lot of technological communication. It manages the effect of technology on the younger generation and on us basically as well. So I can't wait to talk to you about that, and I actually can't wait to introduce you to her. And I want to give you a lot bigger, welcome and thank you. So hello, Dr. Lisa, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
I only gave them just a little bit of the last thing that you've done, but we can talk a little bit about your education and how you got there and what is Digital Academy. And there's so many questions that I have about how you got to that point and why this is such an important thing and why it matters so much in our day and age. So kind of what we're going to be talking today about.
Great.
But so let's introduce the audience to who Dr. Lisa Strohman is. So let's start there. What brought you into this? You're a PhD in psychology, or you're a clinical psychologist, and you have a lot of experience in private practice with that, as well as you work with the FBI on profiling. So you have a phenomenal resume, and really phenomenal resume. So what brought you into the interface with digital? So you went from psychology to profiling, which is still psychology, to digital products. How did that transition happen? Do you want to go all the way back, or do you just want to talk?
Yeah, a little bit. I think if we go back, because I definitely got here not in an intended way. So I'll go back a little bit. In undergraduate, I was a psychology undergrad major, minoring in rhetoric and communication, trying to figure out how we talk to each other and deal with just the world of psychology. And I worked with a family who had autistic children, had 4 of them, and I started doing a lot of policy work. And so this is where kind of my resume, like, people think like it's super crazy, but naturally got to working in the U.S. Congress. I contacted one of the congressmen and was really advocating for the family, and they invited me to come work in D.C. as legislative assistant. So I did that. And then as my mentor in undergrad told me, she said, you're really great at this policy stuff. You should get a law degree and do a JD PhD program. And I thought, well, yeah, I can do that. Like, nobody in my family had really gone off to college, and like I had already done it once and I could do it again. I didn't think really what that meant. But I don't know if your listeners might think that sounds crazy. But it was really kind of pushed me into this field of like, how do I represent populations and people who needed the help? And so that's really how I got into kind of that law psychology program. It took like 5 students a year. They did not accept me the first year I applied, and he said if you got your grades up, or not your grades, I had like a 3.9, but my law school admission test, he said if you had it 2 points higher, I would have admitted you on the spot. So I retook it, and I went up 2 points, and I called him back. And I said, am I in now? And he said, yes, you're in. So, yeah, so it's a little bit of persistence and a little bit of grit, like, and how to get what you want. So that's really how I got into the area where I even could make the FBI possible.
Right.
There's students ahead of me that had done it, had gone into this program, this honors internship program, and I was really interested in it. My dad had worked in law enforcement in my life. He was a bureau chief at Department of Justice, and so I thought, well, that would be pretty cool to have on my resume, and didn't think I would get it, and I did. So again, it was just like another one of those kind of exciting times. Yeah.
So you just went for it, like you basically just like, I'm going to do this because why shouldn't I try and see how it goes, and at least try, basically.
Yeah, and I think back in the day, the honors intern program, the HIP program, it was a 25-page application, and if you made it through, they brought in 2 students per state into this program, and if you made it to a certain threshold, then they did what equates to like a $10,000 to $15,000 background investigation, meaning like the agents like came to my hometown, interviewed my elementary school teachers, made sure, and you had to do a polygraph test. Wow. It was super intense to get into that program. Yeah.
That's what it takes to be a profiler?
No, so I was just an honors intern. So the bureau, and so I could have been assigned to take photographs for tourists in DC. Because of my JD PhD program, I was a grad student. I think because other students with the JD PhD program had been in the profiling division, which is not part of BAU. It's housed adjacent, like kind of in that same region, but BAU is like on the campus of actually like where the agents train in Quantico, and the profiling division, which my unit was called CASCU, Child Abduction Serial Killer Unit. So that's all I did was child abduction. I did homicidal pedophilia, actually, as an honors intern. So it's like horrible work, like actually. Yeah. But yeah, so how I got to them was through that honors intern program. The profilers themselves are all agents that have spent a minimum of 7 years as field agents. So meaning across the United States, every city has at least one field office. If it's like a big city like, San Francisco, LA, Texas has like, they'll have more than one field office. But those agents go and work like basically federal crime cases. So we're talking like gangs, we're talking that cross state borders, bank robberies, anything that federally is like impacted by any legal issues. And so those agents have to work field hours, and then once they get 7 years, then they can actually try to get into the profiling division. So those guys are like the best of the best in the nation that make it. And there was women there too. There was 3 women, and the balance were men in the agency.
Out of how many?
3 women, probably out of 30. So not very many women, 2 agents, and then 1 professional psychologist staff, right? Which is like being a second-class citizen. If you don't carry a gun and you're not an agent, then you really are a second-class citizen in the Bureau's eyes. It's called professional staffing. So there's half of the Bureau is like professional staffing, which is like the PhD was the research clinical like aspect of like looking up sort of like profiling theories and things like that. And then the agents were the ones that carry the guns and get all the glory, those kind of things.
I like the profiling job a lot. I like the idea of the profiling job.
Oh my gosh. I still have friends in the field that I've had from ever. I mean, the guy who was in charge, Jim, was one of the profilers on the Unabomber case. Jean Rugala is like by far the leading expert in school and workplace violence, like from back in the day, which kind of leads me into how I got to where, like to your point of where I am, is I was an honors intern. The director at the time was Louis Free. I was really a hard worker. So we did homicidal pedophilia. I had 387 cases that are burned into my memory of all of the kids that I had
387.
Yeah, of, kids that had been like abducted, molested, raped, and then there's pictures in all the files. And my job as an honors intern was really to like hunt down the offenders in those cases. Were they still in prison? Were they out? Had they been released? Like, what was the historical significance of what happened to them? And so at the end of that time, and at the same time, by the way, you get to sit through like briefings. So like we had international cases that were coming in from all over the world that were like serial killer cases that they couldn't solve. And so they would like consult, quote unquote, with us, and you'd sit in the room and you'd hear like kind of what they had done and what our people had done in these think tank sessions on just crazy cases, which was so educational. We got training and classes at the BAU. It was myself. I was the only like student intern there at that specific unit. I got trained. I got to go tour like NSA and Secret Service and all of the different local or CIA organizations. So again, like a very privileged place to be. And then at the end, Louis Free was really impressed with the reporting that I had done. I had put together like basically a report on like what I had found, and it was really comprehensive. And he at the time, I don't know if your listeners have heard, but Director Free at the time I think had 7 children, 6 or 7. But he's definitely like had a large family. And at that time, this was in '98, there had been a significant increase in the number of women being abducted and murdered and having their children taken out of utero. And so this quote unquote infant abduction was happening.
Wow. Okay.
And it was a result of us in our efforts to lock down hospitals. So babies were being stolen out of hospitals. They went through and they redesigned all of these hospitals and they locked them down a lot more efficiently so that you couldn't come in and steal babies as much. And so the result was you still had the same number of women who needed babies. And so now they couldn't get into hospitals to steal them. And so they ended up like finding pregnant women in random places and abducting them, murdering them, and then cutting their babies out of them, which was,
God.
Yeah. And there's probably about, on average, about almost 20 a year that was happening. So it's not a huge number, but to Director Freeze, it was enough, Yeah, he was like, it's becoming violent. Our citizens are at risk. I did not have kids at the time, and my husband and I did not have kids for 16 years because I was totally paranoid. Yeah. Homicidal pedophilia and like women getting abducted in pregnancy. It's very clear.
I'm good.
Yeah.
We're good. We're not dealing with that. Whatever happens, we're not dealing with that.
Right. So I started like gleefully, like I'm in Quantico, like doing work. I was living at the dorms at the FBI Academy. Everything was fine. And then in 1999, so this is like it turned over into 1999, and in April of '99, that's Cleveland, like Harrison, Cleveland, like that's when they shot up Columbine. And so I happened to be in the profiling division of the FBI with my very close friend, Jean Rugala, who's the head of the profiling division in the nation, not probably internationally, who was the person who was tasked to that case. And so it was so illuminating to see what even back in 1999, before the smartphone and all of the information that our children are putting out online now, how much content both of those young men had put out online in terms of what they were doing, how long they had been talking about doing it, the arrest that had occurred a year prior, and just all of the different things that we should know and the pain and the damage. And that's really where I got the education that brings me to where I am today, was because I was immersed within all these cybersecurity specialists and technical advisors that came in and was like, these are the things that you can do. Here's how it works, and this is what's happening. So that's really what brought me into having this knowledge of, kind of being at the right place at a horrific time in our history.
So it was not something that, like, I'm going to do this. No, it's been building and building and building with your career, with a little bit of at a time of what you've been doing with psychology and law and going into FBI and profiling into kids and the specific social situation that happened. Well, that's kind of how life is anyway. So we kind of become a collection of our experiences, and we try to do the best we can with that. But what you're doing is not just the best for yourself. What you're doing is impacting a lot of people. So can you give us a bit of a background on Digital Academy?
Yes. So Digital Citizen Academy was really my effort of, so it's really was my effort of, I've got a clinical practice now. I work in the field. Probably about 7 years ago, I accosted Dr. Drew Pinsky, if everybody knows Dr. Drew, in addiction, and I was like, look, you're late, I paid to meet you, and I need your voice in this field of technology addiction because nobody's talking about it. And his response to me was, do you have your own technology myth? So wow. He was great, and really was like, it was becoming such like this massive influence when I went to restaurants or grocery stores or all of these different places where I was seeing these parents just handing over these devices, which of course in my feeling was like this kind of very, very slippery slope of how we're impacting brain and the damage that can create in these developing minds. And so that's really like when I started to see the science behind it and the amount of research that was not being publicized, it was not something that people were talking about, I said, okay, I can only help one family at a time. So if I create DC, and I was like, I don't want to do it online because that's really hypocritical of me. But then I really came to the position where if I don't do it online, I'm not going to meet I'm not going to meet the need that's out there. And that's how DCA was really born.
Well, if you're not online, you don't exist in that day and age. It's really, really weird. Unless you're a very local business, that's it. Then you're fine. And, mom and pop kind of thing, everybody knows you in the community, fantastic. But in our day and age, you cannot do any business. Nobody knows who you are if you don't have a proper presence online, which kind of goes against, like you were talking about, against what you're trying to accomplish. But what kind of research were you doing in college, and during your PhD and during your undergrad that got you into this? What were you always interested in working with children?
I did, probably vulnerable populations. I did some Alzheimer's research, and then I did a lot of addiction work. I've done special needs addiction work, like sex addictions and the mentally challenged populations. I did a lot of case work with foster divisions and those places that, again, vulnerable populations. And then I did a lot of risk assessment, like how do you define and interpret and understand what risks are, and how do you communicate? So it was risk communication work that most of my research was around.
Okay, so what are you actually doing with Digital Citizen Academy? You go on TV and you talk about it, and you've been showcased on many networks, and people have you talk about it. What exactly are you guys talking? What are you guys doing with that? How are you converting that?
Yeah, so DCA, it's interesting. DCA was originally built for educational platforms. So we were going to go into schools specifically and provide lessons. So DCA itself is an age-specific lesson. So K through 12, we create content and lessons for each of the grades. It's teacher-facilitated. It has a lot of communications. It's science-based. We talk about research. We bring up like most recent research or news media so that kids can talk about relevant things in the news depending on the age of the student that's involved. And then we're just launching our home program, which is going to be ready in about probably a month, 2 months, because not all schools can afford it. Not all schools can have it. And not all schools can implement it just because they don't have enough academic time in their day. So we're doing kind of a B2B model as well as a B2C, like direct to business, direct to consumer, and so that everybody should be able to have access to this content. I created a nonprofit, Digital Citizen Foundation, so that those people who can't afford it have it, and then we're trying to raise some funds for therapeutic resources for those that are impacted negatively with either cyberbullying or self-harm or suicide or things like that. Yeah.
So you're basically touching upon a lot of the mental health issues with the children and how they're kind of talking about it through media. And are you teaching teachers to deal with it psychologically, with, you know, kind of help them deal with the children that way, or how does this work?
Yeah, so we have the actual program itself, which is like the lessons that the students can go through, which are whiteboard videos, super fun. We have Digis, like my little robot digital citizen who makes all the mistakes, so the kids can watch him make all of his little mistakes. And then like this is Digi, like he's like a super cute, like little superhero. Awesome, yeah. The teenage version is like currently being designed for the teenagers, so he's grown up a little bit for those guys. But so we have Digi that does that. So that's our lessons, and like the parts that is really kind of the end consumer is the students. For the teachers and the parents and the administrators, we have a bunch of webinars that go in and talk about, like I have one on brain science, and I talk about like the neurochemical impact of technology as well as the structural impacts, and how are those different, and why does it feel like we're teaching students that are different than they were a decade ago? Because they are different. Right. You know, and so I have a lot of things that are in there, and we have we're opening up actually for the first time a forum. So fingers crossed that our teachers use it wisely, and we'll see how that goes. But so they can start talking to each other about what are they seeing in the classroom, what's working for them, what's not working for them, and how they can share information.
That's beautiful, and it's going to be great for the children as well, because once they have a platform where, you know, somebody's actually going to teach them, hey, this is how you do it properly, this is how you deal with emotion properly. It's going to be a lot easier for them to negotiate the social situations that they're in every day. So,
and I think on that point, I will tell you that we have for our teen clients, my high school level, we have it's actually through all of them, like 6th grade, in the middle school and high school, we have a peer-to-peer program, which is the Technology Leadership Council, and that is such a beautiful thing. To your point that they're teaching, I feel like if we empower them, they teach each other. And so one of my teenagers that I had, she said, I just don't know what to do. This boy keeps asking me for naked pictures. And I said, all right. And I texted her back and I said, send him this. And it was a graphic of the statute, the applicable statute for solicitation of child pornography, which is, you know, with it was a felony case because she was only 13 at the time. And then then I sent her a picture of like a naked mole rat, which is like so disgusting to look at. I said, send him these 2 things. And so she's like, you have no idea how many people I've sent that to. Like all these girls have this like in their repertoire of like how they're like combating these guys that are asking them for inappropriate posting. So that's a very good point.
And it's that, and also like you give them tools, and that's the important part, because at that age, first of all, they don't know who they are.
Right.
It takes what, 20s and, you know, maybe 30s that you kind of have a clue who you are, but you don't have any clue. You think you know a lot, but you think you know everything at 13.
Right. Well, and you've grown up online, right?
Yeah.
So everything is it's like moderated by how many likes do I have, and do I have a lot of followers, and is my picture right? And, you know, I didn't even know about like these photo editing apps, like, you know, 5 years ago, and somebody asked me to do a story on it, and I started looking into it, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I kept putting pictures up of myself that weren't edited. I was like, no wonder everybody looks so great. Right.
But yeah, we do live in a what do you call it, a society? We need approval. We need acceptance.
External validation, right?
Validation, thank you.
Yeah.
Not functioning yet. Hold on, I need more.
And voyeuristic, too, right? It's a little bit voyeuristic in that sense that people sometimes just want to watch what other people are doing. Like, so
you're sitting in your home and you're watching the entire, you know, a group of your friends living their lives, and you're just sitting there doing nothing if you choose to do that. But do you think it's turned us, technology, do you think it's turned us more social or less social? Like with each other? What's happened? Because I can see it both ways. But.
Right. I think it's super interesting. I think that if you wanted to look strictly at the metrics, right, of like the number of people that are connecting, it looks like we're more social, quote unquote, social, right? But if you look at how we're connecting and if they're authentic connections that are attachment, like, so, you know, as a psychologist, I look at attachment. Like, are we really attached to one another? Do we really authentically know that person who we're talking to? And if you look at some of the apps that, quote unquote, connect us, right, like Meet Me or Tinder or any of those ones that are like created so that we're kind of creating social dynamics with us, they're not authentic connections, and there's nothing in them that is genuine attachment associated, which leads to hopelessness, anxiety, and depression in social beings, which humans are.
So is that why suicide is going up? Is it that detachment we're seeing from media? Is it?
I would argue yes. I mean, I think that I speak often about like the rate of 10 to 14-year-olds, and in the decade between 2006 and 2016, there was a 200% increase in young girls 10 to 14 and a 50% increase in boys the same age. And we're talking 10-year-olds. I have a 10 and 11-year-old right now. And so I look at those ages, and I got a call 2 days ago from a reporter who said an 8-year-old committed suicide in Tucson over a Fortnite game. 8, right?
Over Fortnite game.
Over Fortnite, right, which again, an argument over Fortnite with his mother. And so I look at those things and I think, like, is that, again, like that child feels, quote unquote, involved in some sort of social network to the point of taking his own life when he's not able to be in it. So I think that if you're asking someone that's probably 30 and over or 25 and over, I think that they would say that we're less connected than we ever have been and less social than we've ever been. But I think if you ask children that are younger than that, I think that they would say that they're more connected than ever. Because even though we may look at it and understand that it's not genuine, authentic connections that are pretty vacuous in the sense of making us feel good about ourselves, they don't see it that way. And so it's a difference in reporting. And that's why I said the metric that you're asking matters. Yeah.
So it's a difference in reporting, like you said, but it's got to do with the fact that they don't really have that much. The young ones, the Padawans.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't really have the social interaction, the hanging out with the groups and going out and doing whatever. They don't have that yet. I mean, they kind of do, but mostly they're on Snapchat, they're on Instagram, if they're even on Instagram, but and like you said, on Fortnite, which is kind of taking over the world,
right? Which they feel is really social, right? I mean, in their eyes, that it's really, really social for them. So, but yeah, I mean, that's the challenge where, like, you can't take that generation and pull them into, like, say, a work office environment and assume that they're gonna excel, because they've never done it before. They don't know what that's like.
Right. I was talking to somebody who just hired a 24-year-old male, and he was supposed to answer the phones, and and he didn't know. The 24-year-old had no idea how to use the phone and how to operate his phone. It's like, I've never used the phone in my life, and it was shocking to the person I was interviewing, but it's kind of shocking to me too, in a way, because it's 2018, and no matter what you do, you kind of I mean, you might get away from not talking on the phone, but how do you go 24 years without talking on the phone? Like, how is that possible?
Well, because they don't consider actually a phone, a landline, a cell phone. Right. So I guarantee the 24-year-old has talked on a phone, or has had a phone in his possession, and he has used the phone in a talking capacity, but probably 90% of his communication is via, like, snapping or texting or something like that. Yeah.
He's like, I don't do anything except texting, and I'm like, okay, like, anyway, different generation, they grew up differently. They grew up with technology from the get-go, which is, it's different when you're, instead of going outside and playing with your friends, you stay inside and you're playing with your friends, so it's
with
a
different
headset. Kind of, with the headset, and there's somebody else, there's somewhere else, and you're upstairs in your room, or you're down in the basement, whatever, but you're not with them physically. So what does that do to us? Are we becoming colder? Are we becoming more introverted? Are we becoming more selfish? What is it doing to us?
Well, I don't think that introvert, extroverted is, like, different. Like, introverts, like, get more power when they have alone time. Extroversion, like, is really a condition where, like, you need more people around you you feed off the energy of others and things like that. That doesn't change based on how you kind of participate in the world itself. I think it's how they probably characterize or interpret it, and I think that there's a sliding slope there. So there's an app that's out there called invisibleboyfriend.com or invisiblegirlfriend.com. If you haven't heard about it, it's gone all over, and it literally is like it's like, to me, like worse than Tinder. Like, you know, like Tinder at least connects you to real people. Like this one's like, you have real people, but you're never going to meet them, and they're just going to pretend to have this fantasy relationship with you. And you would not be surprised at how many people sign up for it, just so they have somebody who is connecting with them. And if you read through some of the articles that show like the text exchanges, it's an intimate exchange with a real person who's hired, and typically they're writers and things like that are out of work, and they do it part-time. They get paid per text that they engage in because that's how the person is paying. And it's a crazy example of where our society is going, where we desperately want to connect with people, but like we're willing to like pay for it with a fake person, like a fake quote-unquote relationship, just to feel that attachment, which ultimately in the end is going to, like, I would say, come back and bite you in the butt, because now, of course, you're never connecting with real people. And so, you know, but I think that a lot of the younger generation is accepting that that's their reality, that they may not ever have like a genuine connection or attachment with others. And that's where I think that we get into that dangerous position of having that hopelessness and that anxiety over, you know, oh my gosh, like now I'm 25, or now I'm 30, and now I'm 35, and I still don't have a partner. And then they start to panic. And that's when I kind of see the wheels come off the bus sometimes, when people start to realize that.
Okay, that's scary.
Depressing. I know.
It really is scary, because yes, we do need connection, and yes, that's kind of how we're built. But on the same page, we're willing to make a connection with a robot. We're willing to make a connection with AI. So I don't know if you've seen the movie She.
I have.
So that to me is not necessarily the future, but that's a possible future. A very, very plausible future from my point of view. And because it mediates that lack of time, lack of social interaction because you're working so much, and, you know, and then you just have somebody there that's always there for you. But it's this other thing, you know, it's this, you're having a relationship with a bottle of water, you know, and in many, many ways. Yes, there's
right.
a lot more brain processing, you know, processing behind that, but, you know, it's still not a person in front of you. Okay, that's scary.
Right.
But what did you think about that movie? Like, what, how plausible is it for you?
I think that, I mean, it's becoming more and more real. I mean, I think that if you look at, to your point, some of the AI technologies that are coming out, that are being introduced into society for different reasons, right? So we had, this past year, we had U.S. Congress come down and decline the import of these pedophilic dolls. I don't know if you remember that, but these like were toddler versions of young children that were like silicone with AI technology, so that they were being shipped into individuals that were suffering from pedophilia, and that they thought like this would be like a substitute acceptable form for where they could actually engage in behaviors that they like, but would keep them from actually like engaging with real children. Which has a whole slew of issues and problems wrapped around it. I think that there's people that come down on one side and say, well, it's not real children, but they're this other slew of people who are saying like, well, doesn't it like continue to kind of, you know, like create like more of that behavioral, you know, right, exactly, reinforcing like what they're doing, and how far is it that, you know, like then the doll isn't enough, right? And they've spent $4,000 on this doll, and so now they start to like go and work offline. That's a real thing, and the article like that went into it, and I talked about this on other programs. The article that went into it was like the manufacturer of it said, you've been doing this for 2 decades. I've been sending these dolls to the U.S. And the fact that we're now doing it in a massive like distributive model, now everybody's like raising their eyebrows. But he's like, this has been going on for a long time. And I think that the listeners don't recognize that some of these kind of like shadier parts of like, you know, artificial intelligence, not only are they doing it with like toddler versions for pedophilia, they're doing it with like women with VR, right? So like there's,
right.
I had an 11-year-old who had a VR headset, and it's something you can buy on Amazon, and it was like, it's a cylinder device. It connects with the VR headset, and the cylinder goes on to the boy's penis, and he can like basically dial up whatever nationality he wants, like whatever size, he can pick breast size, all of these things, and whoever he picks out of this quote unquote kind of like catalog of women, then as he hits play, then he puts the cylinder on his penis, and now he's getting oral sex from the woman of his choice. These are real things that exist and that people are using right now. And so when you look at that, to me, it's like this utter like kind of decay of what real connection and authenticity between people are. And we're substituting it for this artificial version that technology affords us. But to what end, right? Because now I've got an 11-year-old who's probably had oral sex for the last 13 months. It's going to be going back into 5th grade in the school year, trying to interface with other like 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds, you know, and as a parent with a daughter and a son, that terrifies me. Like, you know, that my daughter could be in class with somebody, you know, with a child that's parents aren't paying attention to that. And now this young boy is really struggling with the inability, like actually had to transfer care out of my care to go to a male therapist because was having trouble and was honest about struggling with not looking at his therapist he'd known for a while as a sexual object based on what he had been looking at. So that's my fear of where we're kind of going with some of the technologies. Again, we're in a global economy. We have to understand technology's gifts and what it's going to bring us, but we also have to understand the other side of it and how it impacts our psychology as humanity. And that's what DCA does, right? We try to create balance in knowledge and education so it's preventative and not reactive. Because that's my big point. It's like if we wait until it's too late, it's too late. That's when the shootings happen, and that's when we're trying to kind of recover versus if we can go in and with like that ounce of knowledge is, right, a pound of prevention, that's what we're trying to do is create knowledge ahead of time so we're thinking these things through before parents are just handing over smartphones to their 6-year-olds.
And it's the cell phones, yes, they need the cell phones. In our day and age, they need cell phones, but that's not necessarily the case in all the time. But I'm trying to get to a point where we can talk. No. We're doing great because you brought up a point that was very interesting about the 13-year-old that's been, you know, doing oral sex for 11 months or something like that. The kidnapping rate in the country, the child trafficking and sexual trafficking is quite high, and not a lot of people talk about it. And it gets one of the main reasons why it's getting that to be that big, even though it's always just been big, is because of digital communication, and parents don't know anything about it. And there's girls that instead of going home from after school, they go and have sex for hours and for money, and then they go home and parents don't know anything, and it's all covered up and it's all bundled under this technology thing. And it's, I'm not saying technology is bad, but like it makes it worse, you know, a lot of times. And without parents getting involved in what the kids are doing, you know, all the stuff is happening. Like I live in Houston right now, and it's one of the biggest hubs for kids trafficking, for children's trafficking. And I didn't know that until I got an international expert in sexual trafficking and you know, children's trafficking, sexual trafficking. And they're like, yeah, it's one of the biggest hubs in the world. And that's, again, one of the aspects of, to me, how technology kind of facilitates the dark parts of society to surface and just to push kids out of their nice lives, because they're not coming back full. They're not coming back intact after an experience like this. That 13-year-old, how is she coming back? How is that? She needs therapy at this point, right?
Right. I mean, that's the point. It's changing the way that they will envision the world fundamentally for the rest of their lives. And I think, you know, if you haven't talked to Kathleen Wynn, Arizona obviously it's a border state as well, and so like there's a huge issue here as well. And she has done so many things in trafficking. If you haven't talked to her, she's somebody to put on your docket to talk to. But I think that a lot of the new technologies that are out there, like the live streaming platforms, specifically LiveMe and are two that the people aren't really paying attention to. Well, both of those platforms now added a monetization to the platform. And so now not only are you putting on, like Periscope was like unique at the time when it came out, and you could kind of, be traveling, you're like, here I am at the Eiffel Tower, and how great is this? And you can jump in and put hearts on it and all that stuff. Well, LiveMe and like just now basically created a platform which is partnering with PayPal. And so now these young kids can go on there and they can dance and they can do these things, and people can write messages to them, and they can say, turn around, lift up your shirt, and then the girls can write back and say, well, give me a diamond if you want me to do that, and the diamond's worth $4.99. And then they'll write back. And so like that's, to me, like that's where this human trafficking, and like it's not just in real time anymore. It's now the grooming that occurs, that again that's what the profiling division like really looks at a lot. But that luring and grooming is created now on this technical platform, and so parents are like, oh, Musically, which is now TikTok, but it was just like, oh, my kids like to go on there and play guitar on it. Well, guess who hangs out on Musically or TikTok or on LiveMe now? Is a bunch of pedophiles. Like, they're on there looking for your kid, and they're creating relationships with them, and they're convincing them that they're more fun than you are, which, by the way, when you have a 12 and 13-year-old, not hard to do. It's the most challenging time to have kids.
They're not very happy at that age with their parents.
No, they are not.
No.
So they're really vulnerable.
How perfect the parents are. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and so they're very vulnerable. And I think that parents can hear that, but parents are equally tired, by the time they get there. And so if I'm out there talking to parents in a middle school, high school level, I think parents are so overwhelmed. You come in and you're like, okay, now you don't have to just pay attention to cyberbullying and cutting and suicidality and depression and anxiety. Now there's trafficking. And they're, at some point their heads explode. Right.
Let's deal with that.
We still have to talk about it.
I don't even want to dive into how we've gotten to this point, because it's everything good and bad is coming up, and it's kind of getting played on the internet, whatever that means. And I think we're growing as the internet is growing. So the internet is growing. It's kind of showing our stages of development in many, many ways. So in the beginning, the internet was mostly sex porn, mostly porn, right, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And now it's getting to be a little bit less porn than anything else.
Well, it's still a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Right.
Still, yeah.
Absolutely. And tomorrow I'm interviewing a female founder that started a porn site for women. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Super interesting, yeah.
Very interesting. I can't wait for that to happen. But my point is that, yes, we're talking a lot about sex, because it's obviously it's very important to everybody. But it really shouldn't be important for, a 13-year-old, or 11-year-old. So, I mean, we have to find a way to protect them until they're ready to enter that life, because they're going to be in that life for the rest of their lives. But if we can protect them, then it'd be better. So what are some of the things that parents can do because I think that's where it starts, and the teachers kind of can mediate the stuff at school and all that stuff, but if the parents are completely absent and they don't care and they just tell the kids what to do, nothing's going to happen. So do you think that works?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the first things that I tell parents is that they're in charge. I remind them that they get to make the decision. So you said earlier, you're like, well, kids need cell phones. I don't necessarily think all kids have to have a cell phone. If it depends on like what your system is. I think a lot of like separated parents or divorced parents or, families that are broken up or things like that. I think it's important, but I think that it's recognizing, the average age in the United States that children are getting their first technology device is now 6. And that is ridiculously young when you consider the things that we've been talking about and what it gives access to. And so I say to parents all the time, I'm like, you're in charge. If you're not going to take your child down to the Houston Stadium, or if me and Phoenix, and put it like in front of 75,000 strangers, to go watch a football game, right? Because we think that that's a great idea for them to go there. If you're not going to drop them off and let them walk around by themselves for 4 hours, why are you letting them online with over 7 million people at a given time? Right? Like, if 70,000 is too much. Point. And so I tell children that, and that's what really, like, I talk to kids, and I'm like, think about where you're putting yourself. Are you comfortable? Like, if I just decided I was going to drive you to a mall and drop you off, like, are you old enough to feel comfortable? Would you feel safe? And if you do, then great. because like maybe you have some training or you have some like wherewithal or whatever. But if you don't, think about why. And now think about how that translates. So I talk to parents a lot about you're in charge. You get to make the rules, and you know your child better than anybody. And so make that determination of like what boundaries they should have, not just like in real life, but online as well. So that's, I think, one of the most pivotal like points that I make with them, because I think a lot of parents have quote unquote lost control because, you know, look, we all upgrade our phones and we're like, oh, you can have my old phone, right? And it's easy because you're like, oh, it doesn't have cell service. Well, as long as there's Wi-Fi, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, they're fine.
You know, so it doesn't really matter. So those are the things that I talk to parents about predominantly is being in charge again and like making the choices that you want to make. Because you get to make those choices still, even though your kids are fiercely independent, particularly if they have their own technology. The second thing I talk about is like where they have their technology and what boundaries you have around it. So like not having technology in their room, you know, making sure that you have like a public place for it, and then having like set timelines of like turning it off at certain times, because kids won't know how to turn it off. Like adults don't know how to turn it off. Like we stay up too late with technology.
Read in bed. Notifications still coming on. And I'm like, no, I have to turn all the, like I don't turn my Wi-Fi off.
Yeah.
You know, but
I put my airplane mode on and turn my Wi-Fi off. Yeah.
You turn it airplane mode, really?
I put airplane mode on and Wi-Fi off. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Maybe I should do that. But like I it's already on mute. Like I don't ever like, you know, to the sound is just driving me nuts. But so it's always on mute. But like the idea of like notifications middle of the night, and it's sad for us, let alone, you know, like you're right, kids shouldn't, especially when they need to go to bed at a certain time, because they're still growing and they still need, like their brain needs to develop. And I don't even know how technology is really affecting the brain, because at one point they were talking about cell phones, you know, disturbing the brain pattern and having issues, you know, creating brain tumors and that kind of stuff. And there were all kinds of scares about that. But now we're talking about rewiring the brain, you know, differently because we're online, it's, you know, all the time. So we're changing society if we want to or not. It's happening.
Right.
So might as well do it a little bit, not more controlled, but a little bit healthier
with knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like have the knowledge behind you and make wise choices. If you know that spending more than 4 hours 4 hours a day is kind of the threshold online in non-academic, non-critical thinking sets, like Instagram or Facebook or, you know, some of the stuff that we kind of like just like shop or whatever. If you spend more than 4 hours online, which I would say probably 80 to 90% of millennials age do, you're structurally losing like white matter and gray matter. You are actually like deteriorating and degrading that like that brain matter in your mind. And so like know that. Like so make that decision wisely with knowledge behind it. And if you know it and you're like, you know what, I don't really need those brain cells anyway, then by all means, like go game, go do what you want to do, but like at least tell them. That's the part that I feel like we should do. It's like the tobacco industry. Yeah, you probably should have told us that it was carcinogenic. Like you probably should have.
So we should tell the kids that if they want to kill their brain cells, they could do it later in life with other things.
Right. Not under my watch. Not when I'm your parent.
No.
Yeah.
Let's do that as adults, you know.
Yeah.
Adults and vaccinated and we're good to go. And you just like, you know, go have a glass of wine or whatever. But brain cells that way, you know. But let's try to like have a full brain that's like healthy and growing properly until we get to
and you know what
21.
Yeah, and when you tell the kids that, which is so interesting because I've been going into schools for now like almost 10 years, and with DCA for at least 3, like talking specifically about this. I've got kids that like now self-police. Like my own kids, like my daughter came down and my son was on like playing his little hockey game, and she came down and she's like, oh, just killing your brain cells, aren't you? Going over time, you know? And so it makes me like getting fights over it or whatever. And I hear it in schools, like the teachers are like, you know, we gave them extra hours on the computer station or like, can't remember what they called it. And they're like, well, we already had it this week and we probably don't want too much of it. So like kids learn and they start to like, again, it's like us learning we can't have hot chocolate cake, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like,
no.
We learn.
Yeah. But can we learn as a society, because you were talking about the parents kind of being in a policing society, not necessarily policing, but basically like
Right.
being in control of what's happening. First of all, telling the parents that they're in control, and second of all, actually acting like they're in control. But that to me puts a lot of pressure on either the stay-at-home mom, if she's stay-at-home, or on the parents when they get home after work, which is, chaotic usually with kids from school, them from work. It's crazy. But I think that puts a lot more pressure on the parents, is what I'm trying to say.
It does, and I think that's where it gets overwhelming, and that's where I say, like, thank God for technology. And I'm so not against technology. Like, when I first started this company and started doing what I was talking about this, I would get all of these like hate things that are like, why do you hate technology so much? I do not. Like, I love technology. Yeah. It's about balance, and it's about reasonable use and like understanding like the parameters. But there's like so many great like parental monitoring apps out there that, Circle with Disney or MSpy or whatever that like sends you notifications like, hey, did you know like little Johnny's been online like 6 hours today? Or, this person's like accessing your Wi-Fi and is going into quote unquote like, these, areas that you said they didn't want to go into. So I tell parents, I was like, understand, like, at least get yourself to understand the technology, because then it's not you policing it all the time. It's like you get like reports on it and check it randomly. I always say treat it like Vegas. Do not sit down every night and like say, all right, well, I got to go through this, right? Like just randomly check it, because you'll drive yourself crazy.
Treat it like Vegas. I like that one.
Yeah, treat it like Vegas. Like spot check it, variable. Like it's good.
And you're right. There's so many technologies that could help parents with what's happening right now, and they don't have to be the bad guy. Basically, they just they can have the conversation at the beginning, like with their children. Like, this is what we're gonna do. You're only gonna allow to do 4, 5, 6 hours of whatever internet that you need, and then it's gonna turn off. It's like, I'm not turning it off. It's gonna turn off when you're reaching 6 hours. So it teaches the kids budget. It teaches responsibility. It teaches a lot of things, actually, if you think about it. So they're phenomenal things, technology. I mean, this specific thing, technology. So amazing stuff. What's next for you? What's coming up for you?
Well, so the parent program that we're launching, we're really excited about being direct to the consumer, so we can like help more parents that way. I'm at the point now where I can't take more clients, and so I'm at that point where it's like, how do I do that more globally? We're looking at possibly doing like a program with CBS that would be, it's kind of far along, which would be super exciting to kind of do intervention work around the space where people are really struggling in their homes, and hopefully that's something that we can help and do. But just, again, like I have my ear on the ground with the students, because I go into schools. I love my time with the kids. My own kids tell me I'm nuts, but but most kids are like happy to see me and they want to hear, what I have to say, and I empower them to be leaders in this space. And so that's what's so like exciting for me, because I think that without them being in charge of their own space, it's a bunch of adults coming around and saying, here's the rules and this is how you have to play in it. And it doesn't give them the power to have creative license to be able to figure out their own ways to like manage themselves. And so that's what I'm super excited about.
I can't wait to see how that comes to fruition, the CBS thing. That would be phenomenal. We need it. We need something to get to that point. So, all right, a couple of last questions. I know we have to let you go because I said an hour. I'm trying to keep it on an hour. It's a little bit over. But who's your biggest influence in your life? What person or what book, like we'll talk about books, but who kind of helped guide you on the path you're on?
My mentor in life would be my grandmother, who lived with me for 12 years, and had, my dad was married 8 times. So I had like a pretty turbulent childhood. And I talk about it with my TED Talk that I did with her, and I put her picture up in that. But she was the person who taught me about life globally, right? She took me to a different church every 3 months and said, I want you to understand kind of the magnitude of what people like fight their lives and generations have fought over, and understand that religion is a spiritual mechanism for everybody to believe in. And she wanted me to have like this kind of eclectic view so that I could allow people to have that space. And I've taken her like teachings like into my life fully, because I think it's really important that we have grace with each other and we understand each other with that openness. So
That is a very beautiful thing, and we'll have the link to the TED Talk with with this
with Grandma Drake.
Sorry. So next question would be, give us a book that made some massive impact on you, or something that you would recommend, and something that you would recommend right now for your current audience, for Digital Citizen Academy people.
Interestingly, the book that I would recommend has nothing to do with technology, and it really is one that was critical and it actually was one that my grandma gave to me when I was about 12, and it's called Go Ask Alice. I don't know if you've read it, but it's actually a diary of a young girl who runs away from home and hits the streets and starts using drugs at a very young age, and basically diaries through those instances and the experiences that she had, terrifying, sad, upsetting. And that's one of the ones that impacted me to the point where I've never actually done drugs in my life, because it terrified me reading that at such a young age. And it really made me recognize kind of the fragility of who we are as humans. And so when I talk to my teenagers, I recommend that one a lot to them, with, kind of the opinion of, you're not better than the next person that gets caught up in it. And it's not just about technology. It's about getting caught up in something that is bigger than you. And that's what that book taught me when I was really, really young. So.
Wow. So it gives you perspective, and I need to read that book.
It's a really short read, and it's super interesting, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so reading and giving to a bunch of people that I already know that probably could benefit from this book. All right, closing. What's a motto that you would put on a billboard? So give us something that you put on a billboard, and where would you put this billboard?
Oh, wow, that's a big one. This is a question I need ahead of time. I don't know what my motto would be. When I go out and talk to people, I always say, I keep kids safe online, and I really do believe that. And so if I had to have a billboard, I probably would not plaster a big picture of myself up there, but I would probably put a bunch of pictures of children that haven't been kept safe up online. And I would ask people to kind of engage in this process and not keep putting their head in the sand. But I would probably put, keeping kids safe online, and put a bunch of pictures of the children that haven't been guarded or had a guardian over them in that space, because we all have to step up and do it. It's not enough. There's too many at risk, and it's too big of a risk not to.
It's not just the parents that need to do that. It's everybody that sees something happening. We need to be responsible adults and step in and then prevent from a kid from disaster, from going into disaster. So it's a beautiful billboard. So
thank you.
Dr. Lisa Strohman, how can people get in touch with you?
I would say go to my website. Probably the easiest way is dcakids.org, or they can go to asklisa.com, and they can find me that way. They can find me either way.
And we'll have all those links with the podcast, of course, obviously. But I want to say a huge thank you for your time today, and for being so open about all these issues that the kids are dealing with, and the parents are dealing with, and society is basically dealing with all this stuff right now. And we're kind of at the beginning of trying to figure it out. So I'm so glad that you're doing this, because it's so needed. So a massive thank you for coming onto our Wonder Women podcast today.
Thank you.
And awesome advice to everybody. And that's it all for us today, for today. So I want to say thank you again, and thanks everybody for tuning in. That's it. We'll see you all next time. Bye.
Top of the world, top of the, pop the lid off.
The music for our podcast is graciously provided by our very own Wonder Woman, Cheryl B. Englehart. Check out her music and get your free music bundle at cbemusic.com. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. That was the interview. I know it feels heavy, but it was a conversation that needed to be had, a conversation that impacts us all. Hope you've learned new ways in dealing with technology and how to better integrate it into your life, and how to help your children navigate and yourself navigate the treacherous waves of digitization. Ongoing, though, join us in our efforts to change how women in business and tech are represented in the media. Help us showcase the women that will inspire this and the next generation. Make your way to patreon.com/wonderwomenpodcast and show your support for us, so that we can create more opportunities for female founders and women entrepreneurs alike to be seen, heard, and get funded. One more time, we need to mention our music for today's podcast is provided by Cheryl B. Englehart. Check out her music and get your free music bundle at cbemusic.com. That's all for us today. Looking forward to seeing you all next time. This is Wonder Women Podcast, signing off. Have a great rest of your week. Bye for now.